Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Technocratic Podcast. Today, our guest is Yuying Chen-Wynn. Yuying is a head of AI at Peak6. Previously, Yuying has been a chief product officer and led teams across a number of different verticals, including fintech, edtech, and more. Yuying is also an undergrad and graduate of MIT. I got to know Yuying earlier this year when she was a guest speaker at the Aldrich Technology Impact Summit on AI. Yuying is one of the smartest people I know on AI, and I'm super excited to dive into things with her today. Welcome to the podcast, Yuying. It's great to have you.
It's so nice to be invited, Bobby. It's good to see you again.
Yep, likewise. So, as always, I'm going to turn it over to my trusty sidekick, Mishka McCowan, to dig into some fun trivia questions to get us warmed up with Yuying. So take it away, Mishka.
Sure thing. So these aren't really trivia questions. These are just this or that. I'll give you two things. You pick one. There is no right or wrong answer. Just tell us whatever comes to mind first. So we'll start off with an easy one. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Can't live without it.
Coffee.
Yeah, I can't stand tea myself, so I got to go with coffee as well. All right. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a sunrise guy myself. Mishka, what about you?
Same on the sunrise. I prefer. I'm not a night owl anymore. Used to be.
I've
but
seen
not
sunset
so much.
in Bali, so that kind of sealed it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that would.
That sounds incredible. That's cool.
Okay. A tough one. Window or aisle seat?
Always aisle.
Smart. Me too. Got to be able to get up. Yeah.
I don't like feeling trapped.
Right.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Okay. A culinary one. Cupcake or cookie?
Ooh. Cupcake.
That's a really hard one. Cupcakes? Yeah, I got to agree with you, Yang. Cupcake it is.
I'm going to go with a cookie just to be a contrarian. Never say no to a cupcake, but good cookies, ooh, very portable. Put them in your pocket. Can't do that.
No icing. No icing.
Yeah, but when you
That's
find
true.
them in your pocket later, they're just not as good.
That's why you eat it right away.
All right. Last one here. Puppies or kittens?
Puppies.
Yeah, they got to be puppies.
I'm going to go with a mixed bag. Get a bunch of them together. That's my ideal.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, it's because of allergies. Like, I had kittens and cats when I was younger, but then my allergy currently of kittens are worse. I didn't get to pick that one.
Yeah, Bobby's got a cat that may put in an appearance. You'll see the tail coming by.
The allergies are real, Yuying. They're real. They're really just.
Yeah, sometimes
Absolutely.
we don't get to choose.
I know what you mean. That's right.
All right, so back to you, Bobby.
So Yuying, you know what? One of the things that I noticed about your background, we were first talking about you speaking at the AI Summit, was that you had done, I think, your graduate school from MIT in their AI program, right? I know it's kind of not exactly talking about the details of modern AI maybe, but can you tell us a little bit about that experience at MIT?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get into the MIT Media Lab, where I say that's where the fun stuff is and not the hardcore tech back then. But I got into computer vision for my grad school. Back then, I wanted to work on video games. I mean, when we all start with our fun jobs, right? I did 3D graphics as undergrad. So for grad, I wanted to do computer vision because I wanted to render lighting post process. So that's how I got into computer vision, which of course then my advisor was like, yeah, it's really more of a PhD project. You're doing a master's. Why don't we do something simpler? So I would say it's the funniest thesis. I did gender detection on a video using only silhouette
that's interesting.
data. So if you remember the Xbox game with the outlines, that's essentially what I was working with. And so think about that being 25 years ago. So that's how early wild. Academics was doing that before you got to see it in the product. Yeah.
That's really neat. And so was that like a 2 or 3 year program at MIT?
I did that in one. So
wow. Okay.
because so we got to continue from undergraduate to graduate, so you couldn't shorten it. So I essentially started my senior year and then went straight through. I was already working with the Vision Group on computer theater, computer generated animations, because I was more from the graphics side. So my own thesis, I did the gender piece, and other people added on the work. In our group was those guys with the early wearables. They look like the early cyborgs with the glasses, the antennas, and you had to carry the battery pack back then. So we were like the nerdiest group.
That's so funny.
Even at MIT, it's like, oh my God, these guys.
That's hilarious. That reminds me of walking around with my Walkman plugged into my belt and all this stuff. That's hysterical.
And then you got antennas coming up.
Yeah. It's like next level stuff. Back then, I'm just curious, like, did you or any of your colleagues at MIT have thoughts about what would happen with AI? And could you have predicted all of what's transpired in the last 5 years at all?
Not at all. I mean, we had separate AI labs, but everything around AI was very much like, okay, it's the nerdiest of the nerds figuring out just technology capabilities. We all understood that it was really far from kind of actually being used in the world. I did think video games and like entertainment was going to use it because they were willing to spend money on certain things. But not at all. Like, even with the entire setup, it was all pushing the frontier of technically what's capable, and we expected at least 20 to 30 years of gap.
Wow. Yeah. Hard to predict. Hard to predict. I mean, before ChatGPT happened to the world, I wasn't thinking anything like that would happen. But upon closer inspection, I probably should have known it. Sticking with your earlier career, Yuying, how did you, being such a science focused AI, how did you get into product management? I was kind of curious about that.
So here's the thing. As I was graduating with both an undergraduate and a master's in CS, I figured out that I didn't want to code for a living because I didn't like debugging. People are like, really? You're graduating with that degree? You're like, no, I don't think coding's for me. Because I did the internships. Microsoft was recruiting on campus, and there was this job that I didn't understand what they did. The only thing I understood about that job, which was called a program manager at the time, was that you didn't have to code. That was like the main thing I got out of that job description. I'm like, I'm going to do that. Turns out it worked out really well for me because my favorite part of computer science was the systems design course, right? So where you think about your scalability issues, your edge cases, your race conditions, that was, weird. It's a weird nerd off branch of that piece, but that was my favorite course, was the systems design. And as far as I could tell through the interviews, this job got to do that without having to write the code and debug the missing commas, which is, I was really not good at that part.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so distaste of debugging led you into product. That's a good reason. That's a good reason to get into product. What was your first full-blown product role where it wasn't only program management, but it was like chief product officer, VP of product, where you were just running the show? What was the first kind of role there?
The first one, I think full running. So I went to Shanghai to work for 7 years in 2011. Right. So before then I was in Microsoft. So you never truly own a product and decide the direction. Maybe you decide the button. You don't get to decide the direction. So 2011, I was director of product. And it was fintech. It was essentially insurance carrier platform like a Guidewire for the Asian market. And I owned the entire life insurance vertical. That was the very first one. And it was a deep dive of financial services that I had never encountered. That is some really, really deep domain expertise to kind of dive into, where the tech was kind of secondary to the business piece. So that was the first time. So that's what, 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah. And that was like, you're saying the domain was really complicated?
Very, yeah. So this is the platform that insurance carriers ran internally, right, to manage literally the insurance products, the underwriting, the payout of the insurance agents. Like, it was a full-on platform. It wasn't just a single module for like a life insurance carrier. Yeah.
Okay, so you were running product, learning the domain, all of that stuff. I'm curious, like, did you have any mentors or people like sort of above you in the chain of command who are guiding you, helping you, or you were just thrown into the fire?
That was thrown into the fire. I worked for the CTO, and he was trying to bring in the product expertise. I'd been product and senior product and lead product and managed verticals for a while by then, but that was kind of like, okay, you speak Chinese, go figure it out.
All right. I gotcha. So, so you kind of had to figure it all out on your own. And we're definitely going to get into all the AI talk, but just curious, like, when you first got into product, what were your biggest challenges? Like, what did you think was one way, but it turned out to be a completely different thing, just in terms of product management?
What we thought was a better user experience versus what the user actually thought. Especially when I started in Windows, it was very different. So there was, Michigan's like, I know what you're saying. So I worked on Windows 98 SE ME 2000, if you remember.
Nice.
I owned the start menu. I collapsed the start menu, and everyone freaked out. We're like, hey, simplicity is good. That was me.
Oh my God. No way, Yuying. I had no idea. That's wild. That was such a big deal for Microsoft.
It was. We're like, this makes sense. Simplify. And then you're like, you just trained all the people to do things one way, and everybody has a habit, even muscle memory on how to find their thing. And you go, nope, goes away. We had so many support calls. Never had to roll back Windows so fast. I was like, okay.
That's incredible.
My judgment doesn't count. It doesn't matter how awesome I think it is.
Yeah. You know, that really interesting to me, and you're such a smart person. I've been waiting to ask you questions like this, but you know, if we said all this to Steve Jobs, right, what would his reaction to this have been? Because he was like the user is not as important as what I'm thinking and what Apple is thinking. Apple knows the right way, and we'll get everybody. I mean, the famous example of like the BlackBerry and get rid of the keyboard and have a flat piece of glass and type into that and stuff. What do you say to that whole philosophy versus the one that is listen to the user?
There is a time and place for that, and you have to be right about that time and place. So, like with Gen AI right now, I can't ask the user. They don't know what's possible. They're gonna right. Like Steve Jobs' point of view is, if I asked the user, they would have asked me for faster horses. It's the same thing with Gen AI right now. They're gonna ask you some version of Google search. Right. Versus what's actually possible. But it doesn't mean I'm going to go off and build, I don't know, a talking bear and then come back. Right. That doesn't, you still need user feedback, but sometimes you can't take them literally.
Yep. The timing has to be right. And whatever design you come up with has to be right. I mean, a lot of things have to be right to do what Steve Jobs did. That's probably why he's Steve Jobs. Okay. So you do all this like amazing undergrad work at MIT, very, very focused on like nitty gritty engineering science. Then you get into program and product at Microsoft and some other places. And then when did you start getting back into hardcore AI then?
So when I started EdTech, so I was in FinTech from 2011 to I think at about 3.5 years, because I went on to payments and, you know, consensus, there's money there, right? But I felt, my soul wasn't in it. I didn't think about how to make more money when I left the job. So I pivoted into EdTech, into language learning. Now, I was luckily working at a company, so EF, who was very technology forward. So even back then, we had academic models for speech recognition, for language learning that we were playing with. I understood that it was a marketing move, and it was very much a marketing move because the tech was bad. But it was very cool to say that we had AI underpinning the technology. So with my background, I picked up kind of the engineering at that point. So product, you can either focus really on the business side, but because of my background, I started to pick up engineering. I started to pick up the data groups. And that's really was like, oh, this is my sweet spot of building products that had really heavy duty tech underneath because I could control it. I can make it predictable. I can set the right expectations. So language AI I've been working with for quite a while, from the speech, from the recognition, from the writing, from generation, until generative AI came along, which made a lot of the super hard work much easier. So I'm like, it was very easy for me to be bullish because, I know exactly how painful it was before. And to have it this easy, is easy for me to see where it would go. So
that's really cool. For somebody who's super connected into the AI world like yourself, like when 2022 came around, were you really aware of everything that OpenAI was doing, or was it like a surprise to you, or like you were in the deep with knowing what was happening?
It was a surprise when they showed up, because that group, the generative AI focus, or even the Transformer paper, it was still very much an academic group that was looking at the problem scale. So I was on language AI, but we really were looking at different things. We were using it for SEO. We were using it for outer look. Those things in general on the AI community wasn't in the consciousness yet until they just kind of pop out. That was still a very niche application. I think even for themselves, they were surprised at how widespread usage and adoption quickly got.
They seem surprised at it. For sure. In the early days, you could tell they were like, we didn't expect this. So for somebody like you who's deep into AI, what OpenAI did was still pretty surprising, shocking. What was your reaction? Like, I'll say this, my first reaction was using it in November of 2022. I think it was on GPT 3.5 or something like that. Maybe mistaken, could be 3.0 or something. And I remember feeling like for the first time in my life, I'm talking to something that sounds or seems almost human, and I can go back and forth with it very similarly to what I'm talking, like the way I would talk to a human. And I wasn't asking it really hard questions or anything. It was like normal stuff. But I still remember the feeling I got. I never had that feeling in 20 years. 20 years ago, it was the internet. 25 years ago, I had that feeling when I first got online on a 28 baud modem or something like that. And then fast forward to ChatGPT coming out, I got that same feeling of like revolution. It's a revolution. How did you, I'm curious, feel when you first used ChatGPT?
I was pretty blown away. Because I've had to deal with a lot of AI, and usually 2 or 3 in, you're like, this is a tree, it's walking down here. Like I can tell pretty quickly what it's doing, and I get really annoyed very quickly. But it was very impressive in terms of feeling like a natural conversation. And I just realized as I was getting it to create things, right? The thing I hated before about coding and the commas and what have you, I realized all of that just went away. I don't have to check my spelling. I don't like it'll just answer, it'll just do things. It has a lot of fault tolerance of getting to understand what I was trying to. So that's why for me, I was just like, whoa, this means it opens so much doors, breaking down so much barriers. And then my second time was when I did the multilingual, when I cross language something. So I speak Mandarin, but I can't really read classical Chinese. And I would throw something in and then start interrogating it in English, like the I Ching or the Tao Te Ching, which is kind of like old English. You're like, old what? Like that understanding of those kind of barriers, even language, just broken down just like that. I was like, whoa. Okay, this is going to be huge if people understand that that's what they're getting.
Yeah. Was it like in the last like year and a half or so, has it been this roller coaster ride for you the way it's been for, I guess, all the rest of us in the technology? Just, or like, how do you did you, once you saw GPT come out, did you start to foresee all the traction it would get and all the conversations around it, or did that take some time also to develop in your mind?
So here's the thing for me, like with this thing coming out, I kept trying to predict when things would happen. And I was forcing myself to be more aggressive, like in my timeline. Like, no, this is not the internet timeline or the mobile timeline. And I had to constantly still pull it in. I was still surprised, even like when I thought I was making aggressive predictions. I'd be like, oh, no, we're already here. All right, okay, so let me adjust that. So it's been like that, where the capability has moved much faster even than my most aggressive. So I'm still learning to like adjust my timeline, but the adoption, like true long-term adoption, hasn't been as transformational as fast as I thought. And I have my own theories on that, but yeah, and capability, holy crap.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Yuying, is the adoption rate of AI. And you were saying that it wasn't necessarily as fast as you expected it to be. What are your thoughts on that?
It's the people that's involved building the AI product. So you get a big, huge amount of VC funding to AI startups. If you look at who is actually heading up those AI startups, you got your AI research people, so a lot of DeepMind people. You have data scientists, and then you have college grads, right?
Yeah.
So the technology, the innovation, the capability will move really, really fast. But you and I use actual products, and we care about user experience to guide us to the higher value outside of just getting the AI to tell us a joke, which is my first test for everything. But the product designers, there's no really conversation experience designers yet. The creatives, the ones who are crafting language, these are the people not quite in the space who is doing all that work, kind of polishing and creating the user experience that will really give you the aha, right? Outside of your tech nerds who's playing around and very fault tolerant of, stupid answers because they're just there for the new tech. That's kind of what's missing. And without the really great user experiences and the new use cases, a chat window in the end, if you're not socializing, that experience doesn't last very long, right? I think that is what's kind of missing. So you really need more seasoned product design, experience design, product managers that have much more of this of a bent than a technical bent to come in and build new products and new experiences.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. The fact that product design and product in general, product management in general, is part of that adoption process, and maybe that's kind of like this piece of it that's slowing it down. The other thing that I've personally observed is that there's that like sort of desire at the board level, at the ELT level, for something related to AI to just come in and solve a whole bunch of our problems. And, it's going to do these amazing things and stuff like that. And these companies sort of fiddle around with use cases, and they switch from one to the next to another one, just over and over and over again. And they don't really sit down and think through, okay, if there was one thing that we could use AI for in our company to really, really up the game with our operational efficiency or growth or something else, then it would make a huge difference. And let's just focus on that. It seems like it's not focused enough, the adoption, and it's too scattershot instead. It's like every week there's a new idea in these companies, mid-market businesses, 50 million, billion-dollar businesses. They have so many different ideas all the time instead of focusing and going after one. And it feels a little bit different than like during cloud adoption, for example. It was so obvious. Okay, you have your data center maybe in your office. You got to move it, everything. Okay, move it all to the cloud. There was there was a clarity about cloud. There was a clarity about mobile. Oh, okay, we're not going to do it on the desktop anymore. You know what? We're going to do it on our phones from now on. Okay, with AI, it's seemingly for ELTs, it seems more confusing to them actually than previous technological adoptions. Do you agree with that, or what do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I think you hit it right on the head. I've seen that over and over and over again, because at a high level, you're going to be like, we must do AI. But from the board of the ELT level, they're not going to get much more focus on that, and everybody runs. Okay, I'm going to do a little AI here, a little AI there, then everything is labeled with an AI. That's what's hard about actually getting traction inside an adoption, is if you have somebody right below the ELT that can help keep that focus and not get distracted. Because every day something new will come along. It's like, well, maybe we should do that. Look at that. That looks cool. This is like the constant, we call it the distraction monkey problem right now. Everything new and shiny is constantly showing up at your door. I think you've hit it on the head. And I think another issue is usually the best case to start off with is internal use, which would normally sit with the CIO and the IT team.
Right.
Really, this stuff tend to be thrown over to the data science team or the AI team that's doing ML, which are still your AI researchers, right? Not the use case people. So that kind of disconnect also makes it difficult for whatever the AI research to come in to actually get traction within the company.
Yeah. That's a really good point too, is where the technology lands. And like you're saying, it could land naturally with the data science team, data science AI team. It could land with the CIO, but then you don't have the product lens. If all the engineers are just focused on it, then even if it's an internal product and stuff, you should still have the product lens to it. And I've seen a bunch of projects get messed up because it was an internal efficiency play using AI, but there was no product person ever on it. So then the discovery wasn't done right. It wasn't thought of properly for the internal customer. So that messes up a lot. A lot of our listeners are CEOs, CFOs, people who are wondering about how they should adopt AI. And I'm going to ask you, like, if you agree or disagree with this, but one of the pieces of advice that I have to give to CEOs is, look, you've got this like R&D budget or product budget or whatever. And let's say it's like 15, 20, 30% of revenue. And I always tell a lot of these are sort of like tech-enabled service businesses. They're not spending 50% of their revenues on product, but more like 15. And I say to them, hey, look, just take one person and one use case out of your entire roadmap and put them on using either generative AI, or if they don't have some data science thing, then ML, something related to this. And that's how you sort of like build that micro muscle into it. What do you advise to CEOs who have no idea how to adopt AI in their company? Like, what should they do first?
I think I would agree with your approach and just augment it a little bit in terms of starting, because you do have to figure out what is the thing that your company actually can do with what you have, kind of in terms of knowledge, how it works, and all of that. The easiest way is, the concept Tiger Team?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like very small, usually a handful. I think one is difficult. You do need like at least 2 or 3, because right now nobody knows what the right thing to do is. They need to be able to interact with each other and have feedback and then kind of brainstorm and go after that use case. I mean, I literally started, like when it was just me, it was very difficult, right? I'm a little, either the echo chamber or I face the executive team. That's not always the most helpful feedback. But once there was 2 and then there was 3, like for us to actually get something fairly significant going on. And once you have a particular use case actually working within your company's context, now everybody knows much better how to talk about other potentials and use cases. So I think you got the right approach. I would just augment that, like start with, 2 or 3 of your most, versatile people, because they're going to just have to figure it out.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. What's the ideal Tiger team? Is it one engineer, one product person, and then somebody who represents like the customer, the business side? What would the ideal 3-person team look like to you?
you need someone who technically and business-wise is pretty deep in that company's business itself, right? Somebody with at least 9 years and above, unless you're a startup of F3. The product background is necessary, but with a team like this, you can't have one that's just product. So it has to be a product slash something, whether that's product slash the ones that talk to the business, talk to the user, do the evangelizing, or it's the product slash tech slash data slash prompt, etc. And then you're gonna need somebody who is much more on the dev infrastructure side, right? Because everything out there is all separate, and the tools are not mature. There's a lot of wiring and jerry rigging. So it's not just if you just get I'm a enterprise coder and I just code.
It's not that.
We have guys who are very comfortable with duct tape and but in the infrastructure to wire things together so you can get a use case end to end.
Right, exactly. Last question before I hand it over to Mishka. This whole race between adoption and capability, in a sense, of course, Sam Altman and all the people running Claude, Anthropic, and Google, Gemini, and everything, they're just pouring all this money into their AI R&D, trying to pump out as many advancements as possible and all that. And people have been talking online so much about the power consumption problem. And so putting that to the side for a second, what right now stops, what is slowing down or not making ChatGPT come out with 5.0? Or they came out with 4.0, after 4, it was 4.0 or something they called it. But besides power consumption, is there something else that stops them or slows them down? What's the sort of gating factor to not going to 5 fast and 6 and 7 and like that?
They're running out of data. That's one of the things that people don't talk about. In terms of quality text data for the text part of the model, they're literally running out with the projections. Wow. It's without data. So now you have to, why they're getting into these partnerships with major news outlets, the ones that own large volumes of quality data, that's one of the biggest gating factors. In terms of it getting bigger and bigger every run now, in terms of how long it takes and how many millions, hundreds of millions it takes, that ROI, even for the VC money right now, right, they're pulling back because they're starting to see, hey, there is no profitable business model yet, not even for OpenAI, right? So VC is going to be I don't know if I'm okay with you raising another $1 billion and half of it goes to one run if people aren't really even maxing out what you got already.
Got it. Wow, that's super. Yeah, I think I think that's so right. One more thing, and before I give to Mishka, it's so interesting. A person like Satya Nadella, when he's sitting there, what does he think is what do you think he thinks is going to happen with OpenAI, given the fact that so many people, including myself, feel all right, well, what about the business model? Was it really there? Not yes, OpenAI is going to power all of Satya's product suite. You've been in Microsoft before. You know how Microsoft works and all that. What do they think is going to happen in 5 years about the business of OpenAI that made them do this partnership and invest in it so heavily? Is it just to power their own product suite, or is it more they're going to turn OpenAI into something like a $2 trillion valued company bigger than Apple and NVIDIA or something?
I feel like Satya sees OpenAI and Sam Altman as a frenemy. That this is somebody that's going to could quickly grow into one of the biggest either threats or partners or forces. And I think he knows that in terms of just a pure AI capability Microsoft has, it needs time to catch up. There's a talent war. You just can't get that good unless you can get enough of that level of AI researchers, and nobody else really can attract as much, right? You got Google has DeepMind. They have their own actually really big pool, and OpenAI, a couple of these other big ones. But But I think what Satya is looking at this is their play to put Azure on top on the cloud. We're kind of forgetting AWS used to be the default, but if you're doing anything, you're not thinking about that anymore. You're like, AWS, what do they have something? Which is also why I think they should buy Anthropic, but that will put them back. But yeah, Azure was not like on the top of the cloud list, and they are now. That I think he's thinking
that's impressive.
That actually makes money, right? Being the de facto AI cloud provider, that business model is clear.
Yeah. That is really powerful. So it's talent, it's maybe powering their other tools, but a huge part of it is Azure and driving that. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Mishka, you got any questions?
Oh, I might have one or two. So really super interesting conversation. You talked about a few. I want to bring together a few things that you talked about. One was you said we're missing certain key elements like creatives and product design, right? And then you also talked a little bit about running out of data, which made me think that data becomes for some companies something you can use defensively. Right? I have a trove of data. I don't, who am I going to work with really dictates, their success or failure. How do these pieces come to, and then you talked about just the general talent pool of what's available. Researchers, like DeepMind versus what Microsoft did or didn't have prior to OpenAI. How do these things fit together? Like when you stand back and look at it, what really needs to happen to really move this thing forward? Is it the data? Is it the researchers? Or is it that third piece of missing your creatives? I mean, what's going to really spur the next round of innovation, either innovation or business cases to come out of this?
So the data piece is solvable if they can figure out a business model of paying for it, right? And we're starting to see those kind of movements, right? Whether it's an annual licensing, whether it's Perplexity offering revenue share. So I feel like that one, there is progress and people kind of understand that there are owners of high quality volume data out there. It is no longer, hey, free for all, grab what you can off of the internet, because even that is exhausted. And the business model is slowly evolving to get there. The product and the creative people, I do think, is key. I don't know if it's more of an evangelism piece to get them involved into these early projects, because really that's where it changes. Because one successful use case, one interesting experience, everyone will start to learn from it. But internally, you tend not to like pull those people first when you're like, AI project, right? You're like head of AI, data science, my chief architect, right? Your mind doesn't go there. So hopefully with this, your CEOs will be like, I need somebody who's really good at crafting user experiences, use cases, and put them into the mix. Really
now, when you first said creative types, missing creatives, my first thought was, hey, is there a natural inclination for them to not want to enter? Because you've got the creative types who are railing against AI stealing their work, or putting them out of jobs because they were freelancing doing graphic design. Is there a disincentive for creatives to get into this space, or is it just a matter of someone trailblazing the craft for others to follow?
I think it's trailblazing the craft as well as figuring out that they can actually make more money or get more exposure from using this, right? Because all the PR that they hear, if they haven't played with it, is this is gonna, devalue their work, steal their work, not pay them for their work. But there isn't really anything that's going, hey, if you did this, you can produce faster, better, you can be more varied, it could have new creativity, new art forms emerge. So the couple of artists that you see that's out there, right? They really lean into it as, what new thing can I do? What can I create new? So that part of it, I do think it's evangelism by those who are more forward and already playing in it. I looked at a platform a while back that was specifically for writers, and they targeted video game writers, right? And it was something that you can quickly fine tune with just 10,000 words to your own writing, with your own characters, with your own setting, right? And it was built by one guy was an AI researcher and his wife who was a writer, right? So they would go to writing conferences and they would literally write a story with the audience on the fly and generate like comics, right? You can see the audience going, wait, there's possibilities. That's more. That will get me paid more, that will get me better exposure, that will get me better art out of it. We're veering off into that, but I think part of that mindset in terms of product design is also, they're like, it's a chat window. I got nothing to design. I'm like, that's just what OpenAI put out. That's not what it has to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen someone that's really started to nail the UI for this, get away from the chat box, or put the chat box and morph the chat box into something more useful?
So, I mean, I do track Anthropic pretty closely. They've hired a chief product officer, right? And if you look at the new artifact coming out where you're looking at the end result while you iterate on the left, like when you see it, you're like, oh, that's so simple and so direct, because really I'm trying to create. I'm not just having a conversation with a bot, right? So you can see them putting that focus, and even when you use it, you're like, oh, this totally makes sense. And then when people see it, hopefully they'll replicate and other ones will show up. But that's the one that's showing up well right now.
It's interesting. I was playing with ChatGPT. I was using ChatGPT for something this morning, and I was noticing the UI improvements that they're trying to do. So like you can look at, like, if it prints out like a table, you can now see it in a kind of a side view while you have your main conversation window there and stuff like that. And you can so tell that this is done by a bunch of engineers, not product people at all. This is totally engineers designing this whole thing. It just makes me chuckle. I hope Claude and the Anthropic people have real product people on their product. You know, I think it'll make a bigger difference to adoption.
That's why I was very happy to see them hire a chief product officer. I'm like,
yeah,
we are going to that direction.
You know, speaking of all this sort of productization of this amazing technology of AI, I see a lot of people in my network on product getting more and more into it. Of course, the engineers are already into it. If you look back at your own product management experience and think about new product managers are hitting the market now or starting to get into that level of VP of product and above, how much into AI should they be looking? Like, should they be deep diving into like the deeper technical pieces? Should they stay high level? Should they be incorporating their day-to-day workflows? Like, how do you think they should be harnessing AI in their just personal growth?
I think they should be trying out every AI tool that comes along and see what they can get out of it, right? I think your good product people at this level, they have a certain instinct. And the moment they interact, they will have new ideas. I think it's less important for them to understand, the mix of experts architecture underneath and the embedding models and the vectors. And you're like, okay, I happen to geek out on that, but that does not have anything to do with the product side. But having constant interactions, playing with all kinds, you will have ideas for use cases. You will have ideas for how the experience can be better. More than that, I make my kids play with it. That's I get even better. I'm like,
oh, really?
Yeah. So, and then you watch them, you're like, really? Okay. All right. That will
because they've got crazy creative ideas. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mine was trying to get ChatGPT to say that the Earth was flat. They were just trying to argue it down and see if they could.
I love those experiments. Those are cool. You see them on the web a lot. So a VP of product, a director of product, they should, which is a lot of our listeners, they should be incorporating into their workflows how, when they're sitting there thinking about their next year's roadmap, like a VP of product at a $100 million company or whatever, should they be thinking aggressively about integrating AI into their product, or should it be maybe they should be aggressive? Maybe it should be based on whatever the goals of the business are. Like, how should they be thinking about actual AI, Gen AI specifically, integration into their product suite? It could be health tech, fintech, ed tech, anything. How should they think about that?
I mean, I'm obviously fairly bullish on this. For me, if they worked for me and they didn't have some piece, I would just kick it right back, unless they can show me that they did the work and prove that it doesn't work or it's not the right time, what have you.
Right. Yeah.
This is definitely, you don't get a lot of chance to become first to market or innovative or kind of transformational. If every VP of product I know looks for that opportunity, and this is your time window for your use case. So don't be shy. You don't want to be a follower.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I agree. I have the same philosophy. I have a friend who runs product for this company out here in DC, and he just put caution to the wind and completely revamped his onboarding process for his platform. And I mean, they did some careful like tests and validations and all that stuff, but it just hit big, and it like really improved the life of their customers getting onto the product for the first time. And I'm like, if you're not taking chances, at least 10% of your roadmap should be a risky thing. And maybe AI is that risky thing, but like you should be taking some chances or whatever, some intelligent chances. Now, this got me thinking, and I need to do a blog post on this, but I started thinking back to like at this macro level, Yuying, where I was like, okay, well, like I'm a child of the 80s, and I got into like tech and stuff like that. And the late 80s and stuff. But I saw like the whole transformation of, software projects in the early 2000s when they started becoming more agile. And Agile came out and everybody was like, break these giant NASA level projects into increments and 2-week sprints and all that stuff. And that was a big sea change for software projects. Then comes along, it felt like product management in like the 2010s. All these companies are like, we need product. They didn't know what it was, but they were just like, we need product. Okay. So all these product management things started happening. The departments got created, the jobs started to happen and stuff. But even if everything became agile, projects were still late. They were always over budget. Then product management came around and their projects are still late. They're still over budget. The same thing. When will we get to a point, and will AI help us get to a point, do you think, where you can run product and engineering like on rails with AI somehow? Because I look at it compared to sales. I mean, if we got the ROI from sales the way we do out of product and engineering, which is to say low ROI, we would fire everybody in sales instantly. But we just accept it in product and engineering, just like, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I mean, I've had $30 million projects that like by the time the ROI happened for them, it was like years later. What do you think AI will do to revolutionize product and engineering, that conglomerate together?
I'm almost afraid to like say this, but right now I serve as both product and kind of all AI prompt, etc. I will iterate on a bot on Zoom call with my department. So it is like, we thought we were agile. I'm like, no. You tell me how you wanted to behave. How about this? And then they're like, well, I shouldn't do that. Okay. How about this? And then they're like, wait, this is like, I'm like, yep. Because if you can structure this properly, you can literally achieve kind of real-time iteration working with your customer going, well, how do you want it to do? Like, I can make it do anything. What do you want it to do? And we'll just figure it out right now and show you how it works. And play with it, change your mind tomorrow, I'll change it tomorrow. It took a bit of like scaffolding, building in all the right infrastructure pieces, and there's a lot of tech behind it that allows me to do this right now. But I think this is where it gets to if you set it up properly.
Yeah, that super fast like cycle time, right? Like it's now almost getting like instant. Have you heard of that tool Vercel? V0? It's this like chat interface that just lets you make like mock-ups and HTML pages super fast and stuff. And so many product people are starting to get into it, and it's generative AI based and stuff. And this like the back and forth with a customer has gone from weeks for some of these people down to like days and hours, just like mind blowing. So when you like speed things up, when you take any process and you put it on afterburners, it completely changes the whole mindset of whoever's running that process, in this case, product and engineering. So my whole question is product and engineering as a discipline going to be changed radically by AI's acceleration of all the sub-processes of product engineering? Or is it going to stay the same and it's not going to get that fast? It'll get faster and better, but not as fast as it would take to just really upend the whole way we do agile development.
All the individual roles in terms of scope will expand, because essentially a lot of things that would took you longer before, like writing the requirements, writing the JIRA tickets, like all of those things will be sped up, right? So your role will be, I call it the actor / writer / producer equivalent, right? So you're going to be like product / AI prompt engineer / QA / evangelist. You're going to be architect / developer / that is for sure the people who can become the more versatile talent will have the best time. They'll be like, wait, I can just iterate through all of these things. Even the UI, I don't have to wait for my front end dev. I can just be like, oh, let's change that button. Let's move it over here. Let's click on that. No, that's terrible. Let me change it back. Even the interaction between the traditional product engineering, it could be now in one / person, or it could just be me and AI.
Exactly right. You're a product manager, and you don't need your front end engineer to necessarily create the mockups. You just like talk to Vercel or something, create the mockups for you, and then just go. It's definitely. I feel like it's like that feeling where 20 years ago there was this thing called webmaster, and then that just like went away over time. I feel like weird things are about to happen in product and engineering. But anyway, I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yuying, you had an article you wrote recently on compliance, and you proposed a compliance framework, to make it fairly lightweight to keep compliance from getting in the way of innovation. And you just talked about, new roles coming in or being reduced, several roles being reduced into one person. Do those two things work together? I mean, was that what you were thinking with this compliance framework you proposed? I mean, where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think how we do compliance has to change, right? There used to be they're the conservative side of the house that's like putting the locks on the doors. I think of it that way, right? They're not the ones thinking about, I gotta, bring the bread through the door. They're just trying to keep everybody out. This is the closest I've ever had to work with compliance, and the best compliance that I work with are those that are technology forward. They're younger. Their starting point is the opportunity that's in front of them, and they're trying to walk this interesting tightrope, right? To allow the opportunity to come in, but still kind of keep the bottom from dropping out in a regulatory environment that's changing on them every day. So it takes a different mindset. It takes heavy duty partnership with tech. And there's not a lot of tech that can talk to compliance. There's not a lot of compliance that can talk to tech. So we're going to have to cross it.
Yeah. Amen to that. Compliance is something I have to deal with regularly. And I got to admit, not really a fan. It's a lot of paperwork, a lot of things a lot of hand waving just because it's for compliance. So I really like the piece. For listeners out there, I'd strongly suggest you whip by her newsletter and take a look at it, because it was really sort of thought provoking.
Just wondering about your kind of future vision for where AI is going in the sort of 3 to 5 year time period. You're so in the weeds with it. And then you're also looking at all of these. You presented this like Stanford study to our CTOs and all this. Next 3 to 5 years, kind of what are some of the big things that you think will happen? And then maybe I'll share a few things as well.
I feel like 3 to 5, I have a really hard time. Right now, I'm like, if I can deal with 12 months, I might be there.
Let's talk 12 months,
yeah. I'm hopeful that we will actually figure out a blueprint for enterprises, because there's such benefit across everything. But you kind of need 1 or 2 successful blueprints to come out before everybody goes, oh, okay, all right, I can do that and just gain all those benefits there. I think it will be a massive shift economically for both all the AI startups, for enterprises in general. I do actually think we'll start to see the beginnings of that in 12 months, because it is being pushed from a high level. Yeah. Right. So people are going to, throw spaghetti against the wall and something will hit and we will get there. The second one, I think, is again, fingers crossed, the multimodal capabilities in terms of image and video generation is really picking up. So I think we're going to really see it come fully into all of our content, which is multimodal. Hopefully come into entertainment. We will see if the industry doesn't defend against it, or a new class of independent content creators will rise.
Yeah, that sounds right. Exactly. What do you think about this? Like, there's always the anti-AI forces in the world. Of course, there's a regulatory side, but there's so many other aspects of it. You didn't see this in other big technological waves in the world. When mobile came out, Hollywood was like, okay, another channel to like distribute our, movies and TVs or content or whatever, How do you see these like forces that are kind of arrayed against AI? I kind of look at them as like, they're very powerful, and it's going to be a great battle between AI and the anti-AI. And there's going to be a lot of stakeholders. I'm going to push back on the revolution of AI, perhaps, in different industries. What do you think about that? Do you think that's true?
I think a big part of the fear is justified, because when you have a technology that can magnify anything 1,000 times, like that's just very different, right? In terms of the potential harm.
Right.
I think what's positive is that right now, at least based on what I've seen, they are getting the people who are technologically well steeped to be involved in the conversation. And it's not kind of just those who are afraid and regulators who don't have understanding of the technology being in a room trying to regulate it. So I feel like that's going to get us smarter regulation that actually does protect the right way.
On your podcast, you've got a section that's about BS in AI. What's the biggest piece of BS in AI you've heard recently?
Right now, we're tracking like all of these different founders leaving different AI companies and shifting. It's like we're following the drama like Game of Thrones, and that I'm just like, that's not. I think there's too much attention. There's all kinds of reasons. It's just that seems just very drama driven. Don't look at any of those things as like.
It's a lot of drama.
Yeah. And very few of that actually, I think, is meaningful for, what's going to happen to the technology, what's going to happen to the direction of the company, right? I more look at, in terms of ACU hires, right? Like when companies are kind of buying out the talent wholesale underneath, that's a talent war right there. But that I don't know. Like, really, are we? reporting on the Game of Thrones of AI founders again.
Well, I'll tell you one BS meter thing that goes off for me is like all these products who claim to be AI. I mean, they're just like, they just say everything is AI, and they're like, I've got this product for, AI driven product and that AI driven product. And it's like, no, you don't. It's none of it is AI. What are you talking about? It's a lot of that that's happening, and it would be nice for that to slowly end, but I don't think it will. It does seem like developer tooling is getting a lot better. All sorts of other sort of scaffolding, like you said, is getting a lot better. So it's becoming more useful to more and more people in the enterprise. And I'm sure in the next 12 months, there's going to be even more. Even if we just stay at the current levels of models, I'm sure there's going to be better and better, like sort of surrounding tooling to help people use it more. And then if you combine that with like more product people applying their product expertise to AI capabilities, I think it'll help enterprises develop more products that are truly AI based and actually really helpful to their customer in a real way, and taking advantage of Gen AI in kind of like a valuable way, versus right now where it's a lot of just hype and not a lot of substance or whatever.
I mean, the developer focus, I think they're starting to wake up to that will actually get them the adoption. You can see OpenAI kind of shift towards it. Right? Claude is definitely a little bit more towards the consumer facing, but I think that will be the key. You want the enterprises to play. You need to capture the heart of the developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, as far as the AI arms race is concerned, that OpenAI has just this lead that's insurmountable? And although Anthropic is pretty amazing, especially for like a lot of specific use cases and stuff, that they just can't catch up? Or are people, you think, going to catch up and even supersede or OpenAI?
So because of the data problem, people are going to catch up, right? A big part of what they can get to is limited by what data. So you can see the open source, you can see Meta's model slowly, everybody catching up to the GPT-4 level. Right. So the AI research means these guys got to the top performance faster. But if there's no more data, if they can't get to the 5, other people will catch up. I do think right now it's a closer race between OpenAI, Meta, and Anthropic.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I've seen some cool things from Claude. That's pretty amazing. But I still feel kind of like OpenAI was the first one. I still use them. I pay the $20 a month and continue to use them, but some of the other ones have gotten better. I definitely, you alluded to this earlier, felt like I don't hear much from AWS that much, which is a little weird. I mean, I hear more about Gemini than AWS stuff, but you do hear about AWS Bedrock and stuff like that. Some infrastructure tooling stuff that they have around it. That I hear about a lot. Last question, Yuying, for you is that pesky power consumption problem. Are all these companies going to invest in like nuclear power plants now? Like, how do you think this is going to be? Is this a solvable problem, even this energy limitation issue?
I mean, I don't think I want AI founders to all invest in nuclear power. I think there's bigger problems there. Technology-wise, in terms of building these models, the efficiency gains are evolving pretty fast. So they're getting smaller, lighter weight, faster to train, less data to train. So that will evolve and that will help. Also, we're going to see a trend of people going, oh, hey, what I really want, what's really useful is actually just to fine tune a small model and not go for a bigger is better. That is a general intelligence for everything. That will also alleviate. But I think the biggest one that will, so I don't think long term this that big of a problem is the on-device compute, on-device inference, right? So your laptop, your phone, when I interact with it, is going to quickly get to the point where that all of that is just going to happen on device. It's better for privacy, right? It's better for performance. It's better for power consumption. So I think longer term, it doesn't make sense for every AI one to go after nuclear. I think as a country for competitiveness, we need to make some investments so that there is that availability across the board, but I think not per company.
That's really interesting. I was a physics major, so on undergrad, so I'm always really into the power consumption part of this whole equation here. But it's a interesting dilemma
What do you
for
see?
really all these big investors in AI. I think it's a serious limitation, and some really big breakthroughs have to happen with like literal physics to be able to service the future needs of like the most aspirational AI capabilities that the world wants or whatever. And I don't think those physics breakthroughs are coming anytime soon. So my guess is that like, yeah, it's going to be a big limiting factor. I think we'll solve the data problem by partnerships going behind the firewall. I think OpenAI just did a partnership with Condé Nast. That's an example. All that business model will get pretty worked out. But that the whole side of how do you power all this, I don't see the clarity there, like how that's going to magically happen or something. But so much of it also depends on what you were alluding to, which is, can you find good business models for AI, and can you productize it and stuff? Now, of course, like OpenAI had, I think, the greatest product release of all time and stuff, but I think they're losing a vast sum of money right now. How do you make a really, really profitable business on the basis of AI? That is going to have to be figured out to then, make enough money to invest in solving the power question. So I think it's just as you said, these are very interesting times, and there's so many big questions. We've got some of the world's smartest people working on this stuff, and hopefully we can see more technological advancement. But even if things stopped here at this moment in time today, I would still think of this as one of the greatest revolutions in technology, at least, that's happened, of course, in the last 24, 25 years, up there with mobile and maybe even beyond some of that type of stuff. Certainly I felt like it crushed blockchain, as far as the promise of it. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for blockchain to turn into something, but no, like at least OpenAI and Chat and Gen AI beat blockchain. But anyway, Yuying, I want to thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you today. It always is. I always learn so much talking with you, and I'm sure our listeners took away a lot from this discussion and your insight. Okay, so Yuying, I know you do a lot of writing online about AI. Where can some of our listeners find some of your content?
Yeah, so I have a Substack, so yuying.substack.com with my newsletter. So that's a real easy way to find content there.
Great.
Also on LinkedIn, so if you want to check me out there.
Nice. And you have a podcast too, right?
Yeah, so that one is super fun. AI After Hours. So we want to take a less serious take and also cut through some of the BS. So that's a monthly podcast on all major podcast platforms.
Awesome. So go check that out on Spotify and Apple and YouTube and all that good stuff. And don't forget to check out Yuying's Substack, yuying.substack.com. And I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in. I'll see you next time on the Technocratic podcast. And in the meantime, keep the shark swimming. Thanks, everybody.